Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Delivering Exceptional Hybrid Learning in Europe and the Middle East to Increase Student Enrolment and Retention, which is the Times Higher Education webinar in partnership with Class Technologies. My name's Julia Gilmore. I'm the Branded Content Manager for EMEA and the Americas at Times Higher Education, and I'll be chairing today's discussion. Please note that a recording of today's webinar will be made available on demand, along with a summary article on the Times Higher Education website, should you wish to revisit this discussion or share it on social media or with colleagues. I'm delighted to be joined today by our panel of experts from academia and industry. So allow me to introduce Isa M. Al-Bastaki, President of the University of Dubai, Matt Baker, the Senior Vice President for Strategy and International at Class Technologies, Connie Mitchell, the Vice Dean of Prince Sultan University, and Loic Play, Director of Teaching and Learning at ESEG School of Management. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And those of you in the audience will be able to put questions to the panel using the Q&A box provided. So we will try and answer as many of these as possible during the closing 5 to 10 minutes of the webinar discussion, or if they come up in a natural fashion. The lasting legacy of the COVID-19 pandemic on the higher education sector has undoubtedly been the adoption of online and hybrid learning. When delivered effectively, students have reported preferring a hybrid approach to fully face-to-face degree programs, with increased flexibility and the diversity it offers being some of the most cited reasons why in the Times Higher Education and Class Consultancy report, Hybrid Learning, the Future. Today, we'll be discussing some of the findings from this report, along with sharing knowledge and best practice about the new strategic challenges institutions must now embrace to increase student enrolment and retention. So I'd like to begin by asking, how can you showcase the quality of your institution's hybrid learning offering to potential students? So would anyone like to go first, or am I going to be picking on people? Isa, hi. Oh, you're on mute, I'm afraid, Isa.
First, thank you very much, Julia, for inviting me to this panel discussion. I think it's very important. We need to look at hybrid learning as something that really helps the students in general. So if you look at, when you look at quality, because I think if you use technology as tools, that doesn't mean that you have to use technology if it doesn't serve the quality of education. So first of all, it has to be quality. Otherwise, it's no use. It's just a tool. As they say, quality online learning, if you put the online as a hurdle, then no way to do it. But if it is a connector, enabler, then yes, it's correct. So there are lots of benefits. I mean, the flexibility it offers the students. I mean, look at study from anywhere, at any time, from any device, from any faculty member. This already has put some flexibility in this kind of online learning or smart learning, as you call it. And also, it's very important if you use some kind of multimedia. I think this kind of multimedia, because students are part of that multimedia. They're so good at it. You need to use it for their benefit, for them to learn. So I call it always love to learn. As long as the technology makes it love to learn to the students, then we have achieved our goal of quality first, and second of giving that. Also, we have to use some tools like learning management systems to incorporate whatever we're doing, like I call it edutainment. Edutainment, you use it and incorporate it or integrate it with the learning management system. Then I think the student will be much more comfortable to learn. It's a part of the whole educated systems. It's good also to look at sometimes statistics. If you look at what is it doing? Like we did it from University of Dubai, 2021, when we assessed 2020, we had excellent results. The same exactly as what we had 2019 before COVID. But 2021, we got something different. The thing, it wasn't the quality of education, it was excellent in online, but the problem was the students were cheating. They learned how to become experts in cheating, and that's the reason that the grades went higher, but at the same time, the quality was there, but the grades went higher. So we need to look at it. Maybe everything is okay, but for exams, we need to make it sure that it is going to be physical. That's my answer.
Thank you. And Loic, what's your
Yes.
experience been? How do you showcase this quality to your potential students?
Well, first, if I may, first, if I may, I would maybe redefine what we call hybrid learning, because in the past it was rather called blended learning. And with the pandemic, there was this term hybrid that emerged that was referring to teaching simultaneously to students who were in the classroom and online, just because of the healthy regulations that we had to face. And progressively, the term hybrid has become the new word, I would say, for what was called blended. So a mix between online and in-class education, which means that if you want to deliver a good teaching and learning experience to your students, in this case, it means that it starts with the course design, and it means that you need to focus on how you will blend, how you will combine this online experience with the in-class experience. So just like Isa said, obviously, hybrid learning will offer more flexibility to the students when it comes to the online learning experience. But then you must make sure that you know what you put online, what kind of contents, what kind of activities, why you put these online, and how this online dimension of the learning experience will support the in-class dimension of the learning experience. This is crucial to my opinion, if you want to deliver something interesting for your students and something attractive and that will support their learning experience. The goal of putting things online should be, for instance, to put, and this is rather traditional in the way of doing, but putting the theory online with support from the professors online, and that's something that we may discuss later. And in class, then students can focus more on the practical applications. They can also have more discussions, more debates with each other, with the professor, of course. And that would, in the end, enable them to benefit from the advantages of online and the advantages of in-class, which is something that they do require. I mean, at ESSEC, for instance, our strategy is mainly in-class teaching, and by mainly in-class teaching, I mean, I would even say mainly blended teaching in the end, just because our students, especially after the pandemic, they require contacts with the professors, they require contacts with the other students and so on. They want to be on campus, but they also want more flexibility. And to that extent, hybrid learning offers them this kind of flexibility that they would expect.
Thank you. And Connie, what's your experience been?
Okay, hi everybody. Thank you. I'm going to tag on to what Loic was saying and kind of give a definition first. I think, blended or hybrid learning, if you will, is more of a learner-centered approach that integrates the complementary face-to-face, the synchronous aspects, and the online learning component, the asynchronous aspects that can happen in our teaching and learning practices now. And through these experiences, it's a service of making certain you're getting to and achieving the intended learning outcomes. Now, when we delve into it a little bit deeper, online teaching, learning, they're pervading higher education now. You can't not include the educational technology tools that are rapidly being developed and advancing quickly now. So we have to make certain that we're addressing those needs and implementing and incorporating them into education so that our students can benefit from those opportunities. And I think after the pandemic, we really had to think about where are we going, since it's apparent that those advances, I mean, there was so much support, we have to truly be thankful about the support that was given to educational institutions, whether it be higher ed or K through 12, in terms of technology in order to continue with the education. So if we look at the face-to-face, the online, the blended, I mean, the importance in our current pedagogies, we can see that this approach has basically changed over the past 3 to 5 years. And the transformative potential of blended or hybrid learning is something that we have to work together to continue to advance those opportunities. And at Prince Sultan University, we have a variety of ways that we go about doing that. We made certain, we have Moodle, which is our learning management system. We've just signed an agreement with Coursera, and we're integrating that into our curriculum. We have Google, so Google Meet, Google Classroom, if you need to use Google Classroom. So we provided different tools that can help support this style of learning. The last thing that I will say here to address this, if we can come up with a model that works best for our institutions, it's only going to help us to support the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal number 4 by further enhancing the quality of education that is provided for our students.
Thank you. And Matt, what's your perspective on this?
Well, we have a very specific one because class is built around the synchronous environment, right? When we recognized and saw during the pandemic the major shift to having to do everything virtual, we recognize the traditional platforms, kind of the talking head platforms, if you will, like a Zoom or a Meets or what have you, just became an inefficient and a platform that belabored the education experience. And so what we have focused on is trying to bring in the tool sets and as Dr. Mitchell mentioned, the new technologies that allow for greater engagement with the teacher and students, because that's the one thing that we did see overall is even though you may have had the best learning outcomes and aligned assessment alignment and even content, when you lose that engagement, you lose the class, you lose that effectiveness of teaching. And that was one of the big things that we saw. And so what we have focused on is to be able to bring that quality of learning. You have to bring the tools, and you have to bring the ability to have that high level of engagement between those that are online and in person together. And that's a unique blend of skill sets that the faculty need to understand. Content needs to be adjusted a little bit too, as well as the technology needs to support that. I have 20 plus years in the LMS space, being one of the ones that kind of grew Blackboard from its infancy. And when you look at the tool sets or the changes in the LMS space during COVID, nothing changed. The LMSs really haven't actually changed for 15 years. And so we need to see what else we can do to supplement the asynchronous activity. And that's what we focus on. And really bringing a better level of engagement when institutions do have to flex into a more robust environment that can support both online, in person, and that high flex or hybrid or blended, however you want to kind of define it. And that's our focus. That's where we see the value to move forward, because that's what students want. They want flexibility, and they want the ability to make decisions on how they want to learn and not have the institution drive that.
Thank you. And going on from your point about engagement in particular, kind of between online and in person, I think something that's really important is ensuring that students have the opportunity to communicate with each other when they're still using hybrid or online education. So how can you build these online communities among students to encourage both socializing and collaborative working? And I'd love to hear any of our panel's experiences with that at their own institutions.
Can I jump in? Yeah,
of course.
I think online learning communities, it's quite popular nowadays. If you look at them, our students are quite familiar with Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, all of those new technologies and social media, and they're using it frequently to communicate with one another. And they talk about class. It's not just like the formal setting, so on and so forth. So they have many ways, and so what I can see is this online learning, it does allow for more flexibility and freedom, as Matt was saying, for when the person engages and where they can engage with others. You can create study groups, and if I may, I'll just give an example from one of my own personal courses at the university. Is I assign students to small groups, and we, in the LMS that we use, there's a forum or discussion board, if you will. So I use that, and then I suggest that they form their groups, they can create names for their groups, and then they work together. So doing this helps them to bond and collaborate in the online asynchronously matter. I upload a research article, one member of the group summarizes, the others read it, they ask questions, and then they provide feedback, and then I jump in, I ask questions, and I provide feedback on the whole discussion that has been evolved around that particular article. And then I upload another one, somebody else summarizes, and it goes on and on. So you have this discussion, and then you have this record from each of the different groups. They have this, they're able to comment and give feedback to one another about these topics that you have done. And then there are also lots of other ways and opportunities that we can really create it so that it is an engaging experience for the students when you're online. There are so many ways, so many tools, so many tips that can be there. Bingo. You can adapt our normal bingo game, and 5 in a row, 4 in a row, and they can learn from one another. You can ask them to put in different things, about their own, their lives, their personal lives. And then they get to bond and know one another in this online community. So there are many ways that we can go about it. It's something else, I think, this online component and getting the students involved is at Prince Sultan University. We're also exploring ways to incorporate digital badges and micro-credentialing for all of the online opportunities that we're providing or making available or accessible to the students and the faculty, because then that will help them be able to market and use that information on their CVs, on their LinkedIn profiles, their social media, and they can see the benefits of being able to do that.
Fantastic. Hi, Isa. I'm afraid you're on mute. Sorry, the constant cry of Zoom.
I keep forgetting. Yeah, I agree 100% with Michelle, I think, Connie Michelle. She said it all. It's very important to create media groups for your students in order to connect, to communicate, to work with each other, play with each other. So these platforms like Facebook, Instagram, all these kind of things is very good for them to actually communicate with each other. Plus, you need to even create discussion forums, generally speaking, maybe about learning, maybe about something, but you create that kind of connectivity with each other that will help them to love to learn. And then we can also host virtual events such as online games, games that, of course, it's called edutainment. So even though it's games, but also they learn from it. So these kind of things may help. Maybe if you look at, sometimes it's good to actually, the more the student is active in social media with respect to the connecting to the community, we can give them badges of certificates, something that will encourage them to do more. I think these are the things we need to know. We need to do. They are already in it with their friends, but now we need to contain them in educational media to talk to each other, to discuss with each other. And I think this is the only way we can do is to make sure that they will love to learn, because I like the word love to learn, L2L, because they are in an environment that's very friendly to them already. Just you bring them in the educational environment.
Thank you.
And I would concur with everything that was said, of course. In addition to that, maybe I think, and that was implicit in what Connie said, that should be deeply integrated within the course design once again. I think that all these activities, whether online or in class, they must be included in the course design in advance. And so it must be a clear path for the students in their learning process. The tools that we use must be clear and easy to use, user-friendly. That's really important because they are used to using very user-friendly tools. We mentioned many of them, whether TikTok, whether Instagram, and so on. So all these platforms, they are quite easy to use. So if we offer them something that is different in terms of usage, then they can be lost. We must also make sure that all the activities that we develop are inclusive for the students. This is really crucial. And by inclusive, I mean it will also enable all the students and drive all the students to participate. I mean, depending on the cultures, not all the students would like to participate, whether in class or online. And this is something that we must consider. In addition to that, we must also make sure that our students are trained into using these tools. Indeed, we know that, well, we think we know that Generation Y and Generation Z, they know how to use these tools, but it's not always the case. I'm sure that whether Isa or Connie or Matt, they have been confronted to the same situation as me, meaning that sometimes young students just don't know how to use the technical tools that we implement. And not because they are difficult to use, but just because they were not trained whether to use them from a technical standpoint or whether to include them in the way of working, their processes of working. And that's really important. I mean, we were all born with two legs normally, and we all had to learn how to use these legs. And that's exactly the same for them. It's not because they are supposedly born with a screen in their hand that they know how to use it. And so it's up to us to train them into using them. And the last thing, if I may, is also the development of peer activities within these online communities and to support these online communities. I mean, peer learning is very powerful in class. It can be very powerful also outside the classroom in an online setting. And we use, for instance, at ESEG, a tool that is called Challenge Me, that will enable students to deliver feedback to each other online, and that would be an anonymous feedback such that we can use it whether in a formative or in a summative way. And this is really interesting because in this case, students at the same time that they learn how to work online with others, they will also learn how to deliver feedback online. And this is also something that we are training them to do.
Fantastic.
So I'll just kind of add, yeah, it's like, since we're going in around robin, I guess it's I can jump in here. I think it's also important to recognize that the teacher or the professor, the one giving instruction, also is critical into this process, because if we just kind of divvy out all these different tools that happen outside of the classroom, there's a lot of good things that can happen, but you end up, I think, having difficulty tracking that type of activity, that data, and how it can correlate back into the instruction that you're giving in class. So when they do come into a live setting because this webinar was really based upon this idea of the blended or hybrid case, I want to make sure we don't lose out on the fact that we're trying to accomplish something that we haven't done very well or haven't really done in the past, which is having this blended online and in-person experience. So you also have to have the tool sets in that live setting that can actually support that flexibility in learning, tools that actually can be delivered in real time, in the kind of the motion of the pedagogical experience, and then also be able to capture that. I think that's also very important, and it can't be, I think, just given out to a different platform. That also has to be something that can be inclusive into the teaching and learning in that live session. So that's something just to keep in mind, right? It's a lot more to go along with that, but I think it's an idea that needs to be always remembered, because we're trying to deploy something that is fairly new to instruction.
Absolutely. And if I can just keep this theme going just for 1 second more, back to what Loic was saying, is curriculum integration is essential. You know, if you're not integrating it well into the course design, then this is where the problems or challenges can arise. So you have to make certain that it's incorporated into the curricula across the different disciplines, or you're going to run into face issues. And training is essential, not just for faculty, but for students. especially if you're going to throw in a new application. If we can't expect, just because they've grown, as you were saying, Matt, just because they've grown up with this tablet in their hand, and they can do, like, I'm just thinking of my nephews, because from the time they were born, they were going like this. And I'm just like, that doesn't mean they know how to use technology for learning. So you need to train them, teach them how technology can help them become better learners.
And how do you deliver this training? We've talked about training for both faculty and students. How do you ensure that people get the help they need to know how to use these tools?
That's a good question. A very good question. Well, you have to reach out, and you have to see what are the needs. Maybe you could do a survey, or you can get feedback from students and from faculty, and you discuss it. And then you can either have a virtual online, as we are right now, or you can have a face-to-face session on campus, depending on the needs of those who are requesting the additional training. It's not a one-fix-all solution. It's kind of like a case-by-case situation. What do I need to do? How can I do it? And how can I support them so that they can achieve the learning goals that they need to achieve?
I mean, this is a big one, especially being a vendor that's trying to bring in new technology. We cannot deny the barriers that come along with this idea of adoption. And there was a survey by Hull on IQ at the end of last year that talks about kind of the barriers to implement digital and online learning. And the two things that came up, which in order to achieve your goal, you also need to understand what your obstacles are. And the two major obstacles that came up were the teacher's capacity and training, which we're talking about now. But one other thing that also came up, which is something to keep in mind, is the culture and change management of an institution. So you kind of have to, I think, in general, tackle both in order for this to be successful, or whatever technology you're bringing in long term. So it's just not about making sure that teachers individually understand and know how to use it, but the institution needs to back it and have that change management supported in that process, or else your ROI on that new technology is going to be very low.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. At CSEG, we have implemented, for instance, a digital pedagogy certificate that is supported by our Center for Education and Technological Innovation. We have also created a lot of different contents so that we can train the professors, and all these contents and this digital pedagogy certificate even come within the context of a larger teaching certificate that we have implemented several years ago now. At the same time, we need also to train the students, and I would say that this training, the first thing is not to multiply the tools, and this is something that can be highly tempting, because we are always proposed new tools by different companies, and so at one moment you just must identify the most appropriate ones and limit the number of tools that you will offer to the students, such that across the different courses they will be confronted to similar tools. I would say it doesn't mean that the tools will be used in the same way by all the professors, but at least the students, they know how to use these different tools and these different platforms. That's really important. And then the training can occur in different ways. For instance, some of the companies will provide us with contents that our students can use to discover and to understand how to use the tools. On the other hand, you may have some professors who would take maybe 5-10 minutes in a class to explain how to use the tools. And again, not just from a technical standpoint, but also how to use them in the process of learning, which is really, really important. It can also be some contents that would be created in-house and put available for the students. I mean, for instance, we have developed a studio with some kind of video booth, I would say, that students can use freely. And then we have developed contents such that our students know how to use them, how to use these devices, these materials, and can record their own videos on their own.
Fantastic. Isa, what's your opinion on this?
I think it's more important to look at training the staff and faculty than the student, even though it is important, because at the end, they're quick learners. When you look at the tools they learn from in their games, it's trial and error. So for us, it's good to train them, but they're quick learners. We don't need to take much time to teach them. Yes, a lot of technologies come, they change. And as some said, that we don't need to change each time, except it's something upgraded to a better one. To train is important, but it's easy to do for students because the Z generation is already tech savvy. Only thing they need to understand the tools and how to use them to make it happen. So I think training is good, but it's not essential. So, by the way, I've not taught since 2008, 15 years, because I've been in the administration. Before that, we had LMS, Blackboard, we're using it, but not as we use today, just emailing and putting courses and so on. My experience is what I get feedback from the faculty members and students.
So I just want to add one kind of focus here back again around the training and implementation of a solution that's going to help in the blended and hybrid space. You also have to have some type of model that's going to get you from point A to point whatever you're trying to accomplish, especially when you're changing the idea of taking what was traditionally an in-person experience and bringing some type of parity to that online experience of people joining those that are in person, and then figuring out how you can level up that whole kind of experience together to have a quality delivery of both the in-person and online together. And it's not easy. And one thing we recognized is having a kind of the continuous quality improvement process is something that's also very important. But remember, going from a traditional in-class only to a hybrid and high flex environment does require some thought and process, as well as the correct tools to maintain that level of engagement, both in person and online.
Thank you. Yeah, and that kind of goes to my next question, which, we've talked about socializing and communication, but I think what's really key, and you're talking about leveling up the kind of interactions you can have, what's really key is ensuring that students can interact with tutors online as efficiently as they can face-to-face. How do you make sure that tutors have this sort of feedback loop and can it actually be maybe more efficient online? Isa?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the first thing we have to look at, since we're talking either blended or hybrid, which are two different definitions, and SMART is a third definition, is to use synchronous communications between the tutors and the students in live chats, video conferencing, whatever messaging technique you use. That's the first thing to do, is make sure that synchronous communication is available. Secondly, make sure that give them expectations. Once you give something to them synchronously, try to ask them what is expected from them so they can go back and think about it. And if you give them everything, you don't give them relevant resources, course materials, rubrics, everything, then I think it's not a good thing to do. You need to make sure that students understand exactly what these are. Plus, sometimes it's good to have some kind of collaborative tools like whiteboards or document editing and so on, collaborative. These are good for this student to be engaged with the tutor. And again, a student, when he or she is part of that kind of communication, make sure that regular feedback is given to them. Regular feedback is given to them. This means that they can assess themselves where they are, what they need to do. So I think if you look at these things, this will help them to interact more with the tutor, plus technical support. If they don't have that technical support, synchronous communication will not work. So make sure that, yes, technical support should be the main thing for the students in order to be communicated to the tutor.
Thank you.
If I may jump in, what's really important is also that the students know what the rules are in these interactions. I mean, it's important that they know what they should do to interact with the professor. And also they should know what they can expect from the professor. I mean, in terms of how much time will the professor take to answer the questions. Sometimes you may decide that it will be within 24 hours, more or less. And sometimes because you need to read documents, because you need to take more time before you can deliver them feedback, then it must be a bit longer. But this must be very clear for the students from the start. And I agree with what Isa said. The students, they must have at least one way for synchronous interactions because you can have whether synchronous or asynchronous interactions online, and there are different ways to manage these. So that's really important. And maybe the last thing is about making sure that these tools, once again, are really user-friendly. That's really important, and adapted to the nature and the context of the interaction. I mean, you may not use the same tool if it's for one-to-one interaction and for one-to-many interactions. And so it's important that students know which tool they should use if you decide to use different ones.
Thank you. Connie, what's your experience been?
I think, Isa and Look, they've added a lot of what is out there, the concerns, the things that you have to think about. And whether you're looking at synchronous or asynchronous situations, how do you keep the students involved? How do you make certain that they are online, that they are there, that they are present? I mean, I know during the pandemic, there were lots of things. Cameras on, cameras off, cameras on, cameras off. What's it going to be, when you're in class? How do I know the student is actually there? Are they asleep? Are they paying attention? These things were, I heard it a lot from the faculty. I don't know if they're there or not. I said, well, ask them to turn their cameras on. This is the thing, and institutions, universities, do they support that or do they not support it? It's one of those things that we do have to take into consideration when we're developing these policies, we're developing these practices. How are we going to better serve our learning community in order for them to become successful and be able to get a job, go out into the workforce and get their career? Because at the end of the day, this is what we want. We're supporting them, and they have to have these technological tools. No matter what profession you're going in now, technology is used. So you have to have these tools. You have to.
Definitely.
Well, yeah. So that's also why, when you're developing and trying to deal with these circumstances, and Isa mentioned a few, for example, collaborative environments, and we're talking in the synchronous space, right? This is an important piece. So you don't have to jump to another tool set to have a specific made for education whiteboard, or can you collaborate on a document, a web document together in the same environment? Can the students give the right feedback that they have to have in that same environment? If you're having to kind of push them off into multiple parts of the educational experience with other technologies, it becomes very fragmented, and that engagement, as I mentioned before, drops. So this is, I think, where we really feel like we flex our muscles, because we're a custom built for education experience in that synchronous setting. Even to a point, as Dr. Mitchell mentioned, cameras on, cameras off. How do you even deal that from an administrative standpoint, and how do you push that down to different faculty and how they manage that? Well, just one example of a feature that has played out really well is in our synchronous platform. You can actually give the right for the student to decide on if they want their camera on or off for other students, but it's always on for the teacher, because that teacher-student engagement is the most important piece. But you can give that privacy setting to individual students, because you don't know what their equity level is. And so, it's hard to do that, and you can't do it in any other platform, but the ability to provide that experience and equity around how they want to engage with the other class members, but more importantly, still have that connection with the teacher becomes really, really important. And so that's why we believe in this case, a bespoke, custom built for teaching and learning synchronous experience it has to be at the top of institutions if they want to kind of move from where we were pre-pandemic to now where everything's moved post-pandemic based upon many of the results that Times Higher Education has surveyed students around what they want. So just a perspective that we bring.
And can I add one more point?
Add as many points as you like.
I think, as Isa was saying, and like communication is essential. And communication has a two-way street. So it's the faculty and the students. And having this communication will make certain everyone's aware of the policies, the regulations, and, when can I, during the pandemic, there was this whole debate, because students were texting, sending an SMS or a WhatsApp message at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're expecting their doctors to respond to them like this. And I'm like, I'm sorry, no. You cannot expect this, okay? They have to have time to sleep. They're not going to be up all night and answering your questions, but they will respond to you within a certain time frame. It's not like this expectation now. Emails, WhatsApp messages, the forums. There's somehow I think this culture has developed that everything has to be answered like this. You don't have time to respond. The response time is supposed to be immediate, and it doesn't work like that in real life. And we have to make certain that they keep this in mind when they send an email to their doctor, or even for the faculty. They have to keep in mind that give the students some time. Be reasonable with that. And so if we develop a communication system that allows and accommodates for all of these matters or issues that come up, it makes it easier for everyone.
Thank you. And I now want to pick up on a point that Matt just mentioned about equity. And one of the most illuminating findings from the THE and class consultancy report was that 83% of students surveyed in the report said they had experienced instances of being unable to access online content due to a lack of facilities such as internet coverage or digital equipment. So how can you make sure that students from all backgrounds can access these online learning platforms successfully?
I think that this is a tricky one. Oh, sorry, Isa.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. You said it.
Yeah, I think it's really a tricky question. It's not always on the shoulders of the university, and it's not always easy for people in the university or in the business school to know whether students can have this access, just because sometimes you may need to ask questions that are maybe too private for the students, and they would not want to answer the question. So you discover that after the implementation of what you do, and then depending on the countries as well, there can be quite differences, large differences in the way to access the internet. I mean, in France, we invested a lot for the broadband, and so many people now can access broadband, whether with their mobile or with or just at home. In the US, what I discovered, and I was rather surprised during the pandemic to discover that, is that there are many areas that are still underdeveloped in terms of the quality of the internet access. So maybe it's less a question of devices. I mean, nearly everyone now has a smartphone, even if it's a basic one, at least you can access contents. So it means that you need to design the contents to make sure that they are mobile first and that a larger part of your audience can access them. This is really crucial. But then for the access itself, it's really something that we do not always master, unfortunately, and that we can't always have an impact on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Like. I think well said. You see, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed Rashid, the Vice President, Prime Minister, and ruler of Dubai, said at the time of pandemic, COVID-19, he said that the schools will close, the universities will close, but education will continue. This was a strong message sent to the private carriers. So what happened the next day, the carriers announced those who don't have connection to the internet, we'll give it them for students for free. That's the first thing to do. So everybody in the country, every student had free access, so they could get enough bandwidth. And as you know, UAE, the infrastructure, IT infrastructure is very strong and very stable also in terms of speed and latency, everything is doing well. So this was the first thing they did. Secondly, you know, sometimes if students are abroad, so you have different time zones. How do you deal with this? This is something which I say always, you learn from any time, from any device, from any faculty, at any time, from any location. These all together means you can even be somewhere far away and do it. So that thing is sometimes a challenge. Those who don't have access, we have to make sure that whatever we are giving to the students, it has to make sure that those who are impaired one way or another, either, you know, we call them the people of determination. The people of determination in the country, we call them. How is it we need to make sure that we can deliver, like closed caption as an example, like somebody who can't see, maybe we can use some kind of braille that goes from the computer to the keyboard and understand or something. These things are very important so you can solve these kind of problems. One of the problems I saw, because I'm a judge of many awards in the country, one of the competitions was, they were a group that actually created a 5G tower in one of the African countries that didn't have any access to internet. And it was done for free. And then what they did is they actually used a group learning, not just person to person. So there was a big screen, paid, and all the students in that village will come to learn. So we need to look at all these things. People of determination, people who can't pay. As we did it here, it was free for all of them to learn. I think we need to balance all this together in order to make sure that this is done correctly to anybody without discriminating anybody.
Thank you. It's really interesting. Connie, have you got anything to add to that?
Accessibility. I think, as Isa was saying, in Saudi Arabia, obviously the government did similar initiatives to make certain that everyone had access. Even at my own institution, we, you know, if there were students who would come forward, because, you know, sometimes they're too shy to come forward, the university had spare laptops, and then we were even taking the desktops that are in the computer labs, and we were loaning them to the students and or faculty who might need that kind of technical support in their homes if they didn't have, so that education would continue. I think that's extremely important to keep in mind, is that we didn't want anyone to feel like they weren't able to have access, because we were like that overnight and we were online. And now we're still, you know, we're back face to face, but we're still using the online components, even though we are face to face. The different tools that we were using during the pandemic, they're still there, but now they've been integrated into the curriculum and how we can successfully support student learning.
Fantastic. Matt, how does class facilitate this?
Well, we're kind of 1 degree separated from the students, of course, but I will say that you do have to have a platform that is as as Loic said, it has to be easy to, easy use is a high priority with that, as well as accessible on multiple platforms. So, the touch points have to be frictionless, if you will. But it's kind of up to the institutions and many times the governments and how they want to provide internet access, how they want to provide hardware, and what that means for each individual student. But the one thing we do find, though, is that by bringing them online, the one thing it does do is it unlocks the black box of a course. Because if you look at what was kind of the data we extracted from a course previously, it was very much, who's on the roster? Did they attend? Did they not attend? What was the response after the course was over? But if you can give everybody devices and have them be part of the learning process live, the data you can collect in that live experience is so much greater. So the device accessibility becomes really crucial in unlocking the data that you can derive from that process, and then put it back into the teaching and learning activities to make it even more powerful. And if you don't have those devices, you lose that, and all you get is a roster, a syllabus, and a post-course response survey, and that does you absolutely no good at all. And that's what we're also trying to move towards is with that higher level of accessibility and bringing everybody together in a synchronous way and having the right tool sets as part of that, the analytics that you can derive becomes so much more powerful than what we've been able to do previously with just asynchronous platforms. Even though the LMS is critical and will continue to be critical, there's a huge opportunity now to take advantage of the synchronous setting. So that's the best I can do. I unfortunately we can't buy laptops for everybody, but the higher level of delivery of that of those tool sets creates a greater opportunity to better yourselves as institutions and your pedagogy to do better in the future.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, we've got about just under 10 minutes left, so I really encourage everyone to put questions in the Q&A box, because we've got a great Q&A session coming up. So we have one question from one of our audience members who asks, faculty in our institution have reported concerns about inflated grades. Does anyone on the panel have any thoughts as to how to maintain valid and reliable assessments online? There is resistance to use virtual proctors. Isa, you are very eagerly putting your hand up.
No, I know, because I mentioned it earlier, actually.
Yes, you mentioned it at the
quickly,
start.
I mentioned it. Actually, we had a study at University of Dubai. First of all, we have one of the 9 universities in the country to be chosen by Abdullah Al-Ghurair Foundation for Education, a philanthropist, that it's called University Consortium for Quality Online Learning. And they're actually training the faculty members and everything tools needed so that to make a successful online learning, or maybe smart learning, I could say. But once we looked at 2020 and 2021, 2020, we had the same average grades as previously done, because it was online exams. Assessment was online. But in 2021, students became expert in learning and cheating. Then it was really inflated so badly. And we talked to the ministry, the CAA, Commission for Academic Accreditation. After that, they said exams will never be online until something else comes, to intelligence, whatever, that will solve it. Right now, you could have online learning, but no online assessment test, full stop. So we're not allowed to do any assessment online. But that doesn't mean we have to stop it. Look at ChatGPT. Everybody wants to talk about it always. It's a new disruption of technology in the world. I think this is the beginning of the 5th industrial revolution. ChatGPT is actually doing all those to make things easier. Now, if I copy from ChatGPT, is it mine? Of course, it's not mine. But ChatGPT is giving it to you, right? So is that something that we should discuss later or not? At the end, something is coming that student can have a glass that once he listens to a question, he'll get the answer on his glasses, eyeglasses, and when you answer, and you think it's his or hers, it's not. So assessment will change, but right now we stopped it.
If I can tag in off that, thank you, Isa. I think that is a huge question. You know, it's one that everyone worries about: grade inflation, the plagiarism, the cheating that might happen with online learning. And for me, I think I'm a little bit avant-garde. For me, I say, well, you have to change the way you do assessment for online. You have to rethink the assessment practices. Exams at my own institution and in the kingdom, formal exams, they're on campus, but they're in the computer lab. So we're still, it's online, but it's in the computer lab, they're not off campus. And if there's an IP address that's off campus, then there's a system that triggers who actually did the exam. Is this legal? Were they cheated? You know? So there are things that you can take into consideration for that. You know, maybe an open book exam, maybe group projects, you know, that they can do online and they work together instead of like a formal traditional exam, and not just multiple choice or true false questions. I personally use critical thinking questions, practical questions on my exams. You know, it's just rethinking how you perceive assessment and modifying and adapting to this current environment. It's not like what's happening in the traditional classroom, you know, where we used to get those paper exams, you know, and you sit down and you're scribbling the answers. That's no longer the case. So we have to really rethink how we perceive, how we give assessment, and what are the best practices for our current and future situations in higher education. Isa, I know you're jumping there. Go ahead.
No, I think Michelle gave me a good enhanced my memory of going back. In College of Engineering IT and University of Dubai, actually they did practice something which didn't have any inflation in grades. It was just an experiment, and it wasn't done in exams. So especially in engineering, you have mathematics, you have equations. So instead of getting it from internet, what they did, they told us, you have to write it on a paper, solve it, take a picture, and send it to the faculty member directly. So this will stop the either plagiarism or cheating, all these together. And it did. There was no inflation of grades when they did that. Of course, now we are talking about going non-technology by paper and just solving it and taking a photo and sending it. But that was a solution.
So I just give you kind of my perspective, because it's very focused on the synchronous side. One thing we recognized is you have to give the teachers the ability to deliver in the time of need those correct assessments, and these are not high stakes testing, but be able to do it in a live synchronous session where you're able to pre-build those assessments, polls, surveys, as well as bringing up in a more of a proctored view, the ability to track students side by side with their desktop, so you can actually follow and monitor them, or even engage with them if they're off track. That's something that we recognize as to be valuable. Is it something that's you're going to give your final exams on? Absolutely not. But do you want to be able to have a level of engagement through assessment in low stakes testing and have that interaction in the time of need while you're all together online? This is not a offline, you go into the testing center and you take a test where it's very much asynchronous. We recognize there actually is value to be able to have some type of lightweight proctoring, some type of ability to assess students, and then actually have the teacher engage with those students that may get lost or on the wrong track in real time is actually quite valuable. So that's one of the areas that we've actually expanded and built out in our platform to make that opportunity for an extended assessment available.
Thank you. So unfortunately, that does bring us to the end of our discussion. But I'd like to thank our panel so much for taking part, and to remind the audience that there'll be an on-demand recording of the discussion and a summary article published on the Times Higher Education website in due course. We'll also be sending you a link to the Times Higher Education and class consultancy report, Hybrid Learning, the Future, which I really recommend reading. It's got some fantastic insights in there. So we hope you found today useful and hope to be able to engage with you at future THE events. So thank you so much and goodbye.